Welcome to today's Audit Tuesday. So this YouAttest podcast highlights what the corporate strategy should be before the breach, or what proactive actions can be conducted to avoid this cyber event. And since so many of the breaches involve identity, we will focus on identity practices and procedures before the breach. So to help explain the right practices, policies, and procedures to help avoid breaches, we're lucky to have Rob Yates and Ted Alben of Get Smart Cyber Defense. Hi, Rob and Ted. How are you?
Excellent. Thank you.
Perfect. So let's start with Rob. So can you please introduce yourself to the Audit Tuesday audience and specifically what your firm Get Smart Cyber Defense does for cyber strategy?
Well, thank you, Ashley and Garrett, for inviting us. Ted and I are equal partners and co-founders. I have a broad business and technology background. My areas of expertise are improving business outcomes through transformation, strategy execution, risk management, leadership development, and organizational effectiveness. In contrast, Ted is our CTO with expertise in cyber and physical security, solution development, and IoT. Ted is a certified security and network architect and engineer specializing in critical infrastructure protection. He also serves as a partial CISO and CIO. At Get Smart, we apply the lessons from both of us, all our years of both technical and business consulting. Our aha moment was when we realized that no amount of technology can fix cybersecurity. It's a people problem. And to drive lasting solutions, leadership and the workforce need and are required to align, ultimately creating a shared culture that embraces cyber defense.
So, Ted, can you talk a little bit more about your role at Get Smart Cyber Defense?
Of course, and howdy everybody out there in Cyberland. As the technical lead, it's really my role to connect people to both sides of cyber defense. So there's the technical and the non-technical. And for example, you can have the best perimeter protection, and you're going to find that that protection rapidly becomes irrelevant when the password is on a Post-it note stuck on the side of the reception desk monitor. And after years of authoring policies and managing security tech, the profound palm to the forehead moment for me is that security is really based on identity.
Okay, so let's get started. So, Rob, breaches are often talked about after the fact, but the key to cyber defense is to start early on your strategy of breach avoidance, right?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, it's a battlefield out there. We're under constant barrage of the adversaries, and by all intents and purposes, they're unstoppable. One of our heroes wrote a book called The Art of War. Despite being 2,500 years old, it's like a game of chess. It hasn't changed at all. But can you imagine if you're playing chess with someone who can continually add pieces to the board? You simply can't win. All right, you got to find a better way. So leadership across every division, group, department, plus suppliers and partners should be on the same page. And we should agree that cybersecurity is integral to everything we do. And so this space between the should and as is the gap that we're talking about. It's the gap that we fill. To make things easier, we guide leadership by breaking it down into 3 phases: prepare, defend, respond.
And Ted, being the CTO of Get Smart Cyber Defense, you've done online posting warning of weaknesses that enterprises have around their identity infrastructure, specifically their IAMs, right?
Absolutely. Fundamentally, business really needs to understand all of the interactions that occur during the life cycle of a cyber event. So since today's focus is on before the breach, that means we've got to establish a baseline. So let's assume that business has some form of cyber defense strategy, posture, and plans in place. In advance, they've discussed, would they pay a ransom? Do they have a business continuity plan? What's their backup strategy and plan look like? And they have to have at least an idea of what to them represents best standards and practices. And, basically, they need to know what the boxes are, and they got to make sure they're checked.
And Ted, so as you stated, so IAM security, it's not just a recommendation, it's a mandate. So what do you mean by that?
I mean, this is going to sound corny, right? But we always hear business leaders stand up in front of the group and say, our most valuable asset is our people. And guess what? The hackers agree. So we've got to teach knowledge workers that their most valuable asset is their own identity.
Nice.
And Garrett, do you see IAMs as a point of attack?
Yeah, but I don't have as good as accent for the corporations as Ted does. Okay, so that was really good, Ted. No,
Get in the room. Again in the room.
Yeah, there you go. Yes. You know what's kind of funny is the Teds, the Robs of the world, we existed in cyber before there were IAMs. We remember when, individual applications were handled and things like RAC-S and ACF2 and all that stuff were around, right? And you just had your application, you said it. IAMs are great. Ashley and I made our living off of one. We made one from scratch. It was called SecureAuth, okay? What IAMs in the world is explode the ability to push out content quickly and rapidly and scale to organizations at one time. They are fantastic. No one's putting out IAMs in this call, but man, oh man, did they give us an opening for the hackers, right? Not us. Give the hackers an opening. Just in point, just look up the MGM Caesar attack, right? That was an attack on a great IAM, fantastic one. Well, they took over an admin account and they created their own IDP. Okay, so all the traffic went to the hacked IDP, right? That's a flaw, and that's why the YouAttest is now working with Get Smart Cyber, because we have to identify the problems in the IAM and identify the problem in the identities.
And Rob, so these types of attacks that get media press, et cetera, so they're costly to the enterprise, right? And their reputation as well as their stock price?
Oh, yeah. Huge. A breach can have significant costs in terms of both reputation and stock price. The breach can lead to damaging reputation, loss of customer trust. In terms of stock price, studies have shown that major cybersecurity incidents can decrease shareholder value on average by up to 9% in the year following an incident. 9%. This highlights the importance of effective cybersecurity measures in protecting the company's reputation and stock price.
And Rob, so you've written about user error being a problem. So where users can be employees, suppliers, and partners. So what did you mean when you wrote that?
Well, the research shows that between 74 and 95% of all data breaches are caused by human error or mistakes. So this means the majority of cyber instances can be attributed to actions or behaviors of individuals, and it could be within the organization, it could be suppliers or partners.
And Ted, these users can be oversupplied with permissions, right?
Absolutely. And without going down a rabbit hole, I want you all to just stop for a second and think about all of the exceptions that we always make for every user who wants to bring something else into the corporate environment. Because frankly, when users have more permissions than necessary, it flat out increases the risk of unauthorized access and therefore potential data breach. So it's important to follow the principles of least privilege, which means granting users only the permissions they need to do their jobs. Now, reviewing regularly and auditing these permissions is going to absolutely suss out and identify and remove unnecessary excessive access. But, you got to be careful about it because sometimes user sentiment and satisfaction becomes an issue. That being said, you have to minimize the attack surface and reduce the potential impact of insider threats or compromised accounts. across the boards.
So Garrett, what about identity? So why does identity always seem to be at the core of the attack?
Well, as the old Bonnie and Clyde did, that's where the money is, right? That's, the bottom line. It's both ways. It's where the money is, right? You steal identity. Identity is the gift that keeps on giving, right, Ted? You steal the identity. You don't steal a credit card anymore. Why steal a credit card? Just steal the damn identity. PHI is the most valuable commodity there is because you can create anything off of personal healthcare information. That's what PHI is. You can create loans off of it. You can create job applications. You can create credit cards off of it. It's the gift that keeps on getting. So that's why it's under attack. Okay? That is the purpose of the attack. And the second thing is you steal the identity. Well, there's the whole thing that Ted and Rob can tell you about, basically the cyber kill chain, right? You get one identity in there, and then it's let's go to town, start moving around, right? Where you start is just your start. You have an identity, right? You bought that thing for $2 on the internet, right? And you got a no permission identity, and now you go, let's do some privilege escalation, right? That's what Ted was saying, principle of least privilege. We want to cut down those privileges so they can't move around. And then they do lateral movement around your enterprise, and they'll look for the PHI, the PII, personal identifying information, and the CUI, the information for defense, to go move around and then to exfiltrate and then to ransomware the enterprise. So identity is the point of this, and it's also the vector of attack.
So Rob, back to you. What kind of strategy must an enterprise put in place to address these identity attacks?
Strategy. Good question. Strategy. So getting the business where it needs to be safely, that becomes the strategy. So regarding identity, there's tactics, and we talked a bit about them, but they're people, process, and awareness. So number one, fostering collaboration by establishing strong relationships between the IT teams, the business units, and the GRC functions, and aligning IAM policies with the business objectives. Number two, develop and enforce the governance frameworks that outline the roles, responsibilities, and accountability for these identity processes. And then lastly, you got to be flexible because the adversary is dynamic, changing all the time. So you got to stay abreast of them and the regulatory changes and the relevant regulations and compliance requirements related to IAM and governance.
And Ted, what would you say some of the best practices around identity security are?
For sure, depending on the industry, depending upon the type of company, the size of the organization, we're going to find that every organization strategy is varied and is based upon their unique needs and risk profiles. And it's important, regardless of the type of business or what they perceive their risks to be, they know they've got to stay ahead of the evolving threats. I mean, that's clearly understood. And to address, in particular, identity-based attacks, there is some stuff that you just need to have in the proverbial fridge, okay? MFA. They got to implement MFA for all users. They've got to have a dialogue in the organization, whether it's written or conversant or seminars or lunch and learns. They got to talk about social engineering, because social engineering attacks occur from the boardroom to the break room, and you got to extend these dialogue to your supply chain as well. You got to really, despite the fact that sometimes it's difficult for end users to accept it, you got to follow the principle of least privilege. And there are going to be examples where that's going to be challenged, where folks are going to say, but I really need to get to that file. And why can't I open this? Or you look at Azure and some of the other structure that you have, architectures, for directory management and directory services. There are certain roles that are left undefined. But the clear thing is When in doubt, opt out. Don't assign a privilege unless you understand the downstream ramifications. And I hope that is a good tip of the spear on how to get started around identity security.
And Rob, so you've written about the need for leaders to provide a well-defined business strategy that aligns cyber defense and the organization's objectives. So first off, what does this mean? And is that what Ted described relevant to the strategy?
Yeah, it's really relevant because you're going to want to align the cyber defense with the business goals, and the leaders can then prioritize these different initiatives. They can allocate the resources and start to foster a culture of security mindfulness throughout the organization. A holistic approach helps protect the shareholder value, fortify the overall resilience, and what Ted just spoke of, MFA, principle of least privilege. These are tactics that are essential to the strategy.
And Garrett, so speaking of strategy and best practices, so I know Ted and Rob both mentioned the principle of least privilege. So how is this relevant to this discussion?
I think it's extremely relevant. It's as I was saying, the explosion of tools that made it easier for us, and that's the enterprise, to push out applications and resources to users is fantastic. But there's a flip side of that. We have no idea what the hell we have given permission to. 6 months, 1 year, 3 years, 5 years after. Palo Alto did a study. Palo Alto did a study. It's a city and a company. Did a study, and they researched people's cloud permissions, basically the admin permissions as well. And they said 99% of those permissions that have rights to access the clouds are overly permissive. 99%. It's an amazing study. Just look up 99% in Palo Alto and access permissions, okay? Because what it is, it's the concept that as we add, we're not checking. We're not checking and going back. And that's what the principle of least privilege is written for, to help us remember that it's part and parcel of what we should be doing. And Rob mentioned something. He mentioned that not only was this, Ted was saying best practices, security, it's also part of regulations. So one of the reasons the principle of least privilege, do another Google, look up SolarWinds and the principle of least privilege. It's one of the reasons they were cited by the SEC for criminal charges. Criminal charges were placed against the CIO and the company itself because they said they were doing 2FA, they said they were doing SDLC, software development lifecycle, and they said they were doing POLP, principle of least privilege. They had failed on all three. So they had no evidence, and we'll get back to principle, no evidence that they were reviewing the users and the accounts that they were giving permissions to. And that's exactly what principle of least privilege. Principle of least privilege says when you're granting access, you should, quantify that and be approved. And also you should have a review process to see 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line, and on admin accounts every month that they're being reviewed. That's what it means.
And Ted, this goes back to your prep for the breach, that enterprises should be conducting these practices, like implementing the principle of least privilege before the attack, right?
Well, I completely, yes, absolutely. And I like to age myself by referring to one of my heroes, David Letterman. So if anyone is familiar and remembers Dave, if I had to come up with a Letterman style top 5 list, so I won't do a top 10, I'll do a top 5 of what's essential before the breach, I'd have to say regular review and updates, role-based access control with full accounting, a strong authentication, and privileged access management, and regular user access reviews. And I can't emphasize that at the foundation, you've got accounting, because there's nothing more important of knowing who's allowed to do what before an event, so you'll have something credible to compare it against. And it's critical to be able to defend, respond after you've prepared. And let me just remind everyone of that really tongue-twisting expression: you don't know what you don't know until you know you didn't know it. How's that?
There you go. And audience, we put Ted's top 5 list into the LinkedIn chat there, so you can see it. Yeah.
So, and enterprises that are sloppy with their identities, they make the hacker's job of obtaining access easier, right, Ted?
Yes. And because I can't escape my cursed personality, it's time for an analogy. So, once upon a time in the land of Siberia, CY, there was a company called Sloppy Enterprises. Now, Sloppy Enterprises had a reputation for being a little, sloppy when it came to identity access management. They were like the forgetful uncle who always misplaced his keys. But I'm going to stop, because I think you can all write the rest of that one without me and come to the conclusion: identity is the key. Protect identity, and everything else falls in line. And enterprises that are sloppy with their identities and their access policies just make the job for the hackers so much easier. And you can imagine how much worse it's going to get when overworked, distracted employees are doing battle with AI, right? Deep fakes, voice impersonation, pretty scary, because this thing is going to get a lot worse than your basic phishing email. You're going to start to get phone calls from your boss telling you to do stuff, and or requests. Hey, so-and-so's attempt today, can you share a password? Right? I can only imagine what this brave new world is going to look like. But in some sense, a little bit of job security for those of us that are trying to stave off the rising tide.
And Garrett, so eliminating access privilege is key. So isn't this what YouAttest does?
Yes, and another tale from the land of Siberia. And I'll quote Ted. I like that. I think that was one of those countries that backpacked when the wall fell. So yeah, so in the Siberia land, okay, and this is a little history. Ashley and I built an IAM. We built one. It's called SecureOps. It's great, all that kind of stuff, right? I did that, and then I said, rock and roll, I'm gonna go do AI, because that's the cool thing to do. So I went over to a company called Silence, and I built AI there. And what's interesting thing happened when I was over there. I got calls from people saying, Garrett, IAMs are great. I go, yeah, that's why I think I built one. And it goes, but what's really happening is people cannot check the permissions of what they had, not only in the IAM, but in everything they have. I mean, I go, yeah, well, aren't there, big, legacy tools out there? And they said, yes, there are, but they take 6 months to 18 months to deploy. So we looked into the space and we built YouAttest. YouAttest is designed to snap into what people have, what enterprises have. And what do they have? We love IAMs. Snaps into their Okta, snaps into their Entra ID, otherwise known as their ID, snaps into their Jump Cloud, their Ping, their AD, and says, okay, rock and roll. Let's review what everyone has. We even have AI scores in this thing. But it says, let's review what we have, let's quantify the access, and let's have someone attest that the privileges that people say they have, they should have. And what is that? That's your evidence. That's your evidence that shows not only you pull those accounts out of the enterprise and you said straight out, I can attest that my enterprise is secure, but in the case of our friends like SolarWinds or some other episode, you have the evidence to show that you actually did the work. And that's what is done, as Rob was saying, in the world of regulations. Regulations say straight out, you must attest to what you have. Okay? So that's what we did at YouAttest. We created a lightweight product that snaps right into the identities that enterprises have, and literally installs in minutes, not in months. And then goes through and allows you to automate your user access review to come up with the evidence to show you have reviewed, and it works.
And Ted, do you see what YouAttest does to lock down identity and identity permissions relevant to enterprise security?
Absolutely. IAM audit frameworks really ensure the effectiveness and the security of an organization's identity access management practice. And the audits that are part of the process will really identify weaknesses in the IAM process and therefore lead to ensuring compliance. After seeing a lot of the different functions in the YouAttest solution set, we really appreciate the fact that it's a practical way for organizations to assess and manage risks, and ultimately really leads to an improvement in operational efficiency at the same time. And our mission objective at Get Smart Cyber Defense is to focus on culture, the cyber defense culture. That's the soft set. That's not, let's throw more money in tech. Let's put more emphasis on people. And the cyber defense culture focus and the associated process really raises awareness about the importance of identity access management.
Great stuff. So, Rob, why don't you tell the audience about the special offer you put together for everyone who's listening today?
Well, thank you. We would like to offer this group consulting services and the use of our IAM assessment tool, which is based on NIST CSF. For a limited time, it will be free of charge, and this generates a realistic evaluation on prepare, defend, and respond readiness. Plan on a fast-paced, collaborative hour-long session. In advance, we'll send you a few non-technical questions in each category, and your scores will generate a maturity level for the organization's IAM practices, identifying your strengths and areas for improvements. Ted, perhaps a little more detail.
Sure. So a week before our sessions, we're going to send you some 10 simple questions that are aligned with each one of the phases: the prepare, defend, respond, and limited to IAM. So for prepare phase, we're going to assess the development and management of IAM policies, user education, and risk assessments. When we talk about IAM in the context of defend, we look at the review for the enforcement of access control, the effectiveness of authentication and authorization mechanisms, and compliance through the regular audits. And finally, the respond phase is really going to evaluate an organization's readiness to handle IAM related incidents, including incident response plan and post-incident analysis capabilities. Just wanted to share just a puzzler, right? We've talked to so many clients and we ask, do you have an incident response plan? And they say yes. And we say, do you have a different incident response plan for each department? And some of them that aren't looking at their shoes just go, I don't know. It's handled by IT. So from the concept of IAM, we would like individuals who understand that that is probably the key to all of the cybersecurity to think about how they would prepare if their identity was compromised, and to be able to elevate that. And that's something that this assessment will actually prove out. Because when we look at all of the things that we're forced to do in terms of assessments, like how do you manage to stay ahead of the curve with 800-171 or ISO 27001, this is nothing like that. This is very, very focused on identity and allows you to realize that your organization has some work to do, and that YouAttest's platform is really a great way to get a handle on it.
And
So we'll
go ahead. Sorry.
I'm just to pile on one more piece. So we'll
Nice.
Summary, we'll provide the identity assessment at no cost for the next 90 days. Just to clarify, that is Tuesday, August 13th, 2024, just in case this gets played in the future. This is limited to companies, not to consultants or other third-party providers. Confidentiality is important, so completing an NDA, a mutual NDA, is prudent. And if you'd like to reserve your spot for this limited offer, then send an email to both Ted and I and mention that you'd like to take advantage of the no-cost identity assessment.
But adding to this, if you are a consultant and you want to talk to us about this, we'd be glad to have a conversation.
And Garrett, what about YouAttest? What are we going to offer for this deal?
All good. And first of all, audience, I highly recommend taking Rob and Ted up on this. These guys know their stuff. The one thing we do about doing these webinars is we get to pre-talk, and it's pretty much why I do it. I really enjoy this. And Ted has been around. He knows this stuff. Rob is the same way. These guys are going to take care. And to be blunt, dear audience, this is something we've been lacking in the YouAttest. We come up with product and say, rock and roll. It's great. You should use it. Rob and Ted, right? Hey guys, engineering hard, guilty as charged, okay? So what Rob and Ted do is go to your enterprise, look at you, actually listen what the hell your problems are, right? And say, okay, these are your gaps. This is how you're going to use this. This is really a great offering then. And Rob and Ted, just to let you know, I had our ISR put your contact link into the LinkedIn right now. So you can take a look at that right now and get a hold of them. Now, to be collaborative, yeah, we're a great tool. I mean, this is principal of least privilege. This knocks it out. We feel very comfortable in knowing that after Rob and Ted do a survey, they will find the gaps in your identity and your identity privileges because they exist. I mean, that Palo Alto number is real. That's real. People have overprivileged accounts. No fault of yours, no shame. We're not, permission shaming on this call. Okay, we're just, come up with the gaps, and then we will give a 25% discount on a license based on this call, on the Rob and Ted referral. Okay, and so you can not only do a access discovery, which is what people do with this product, access discovery. I didn't know I gave all that access away. Yeah, but you can do continuous monitoring and continuous auditing of these important identities with YouAttest. Yes.
Perfect. So let's take some questions from the audience. So it's questions for Rob and Ted. Have you ever had breaches with the IT call centers that the banks have for employees to call when it is a third-party company? And if so, can you give an example?
Rob, do you want me to
You
field
can
this
take that one. Yeah, obviously, the popularity of MGM.
Well, it's a question of when you're looking at a call center and you've got a multi-vendor environment, you got all kinds of different things that can go wrong. And it can be, the threat vector can come from something as simple as a computer system, a printer needing an upgrade, which is the trigger for me. It was a call center for a large insurance company. And because it's inappropriate to mention names, I'm not going to say that Gronk can't get their coverage. I think I just tipped my hand. And there were some brand new printers that were installed in the call center. And these printers all had a web client that was enabled. So they were all acting as this conduit into the regular network traffic, which could certainly be compromised. And the convenience of knowing that your black or your magenta toner is low put the entire call center at risk. So did the convenience of knowing that they needed to buy supplies outweigh the severity? No. Another one that happened in the government space.
Ted, that girl's got a PDF needed to be printed that day. Don't underestimate that. Yeah, okay, sorry.
Got it. There's another one where someone just could not, in the call center, they were at the far side and they could not get online to use their weather.com account, because this guy liked to have weather.com on his desktop, and the network blocked weather.com. So once he learned that he could put a second IP address in his Windows computer, he put in a router that he picked up at the electronics store, or maybe even Radio Shack. It was in Kentucky. And this guy was able to open up all of these other wonderful services so that it made his day of monitoring a crisis and emergency management center all much more stimulating. And once the guy at the desk next to him saw that he had weather.com, he said, "Can I get into that?" And he said, "Sure." Then everyone had iTunes. So things definitely spiral out of control, especially in a call center when looking at the board and reading the ACD, the automatic call director outputs. It's just incredibly dry and boring. It's very difficult for people to concentrate, and that makes for a ripe environment to interact and corrupt the process for the end users.
That's really a good story. The IP. I haven't heard it. We used to do that when we were SEs over at Security Dynamics, and because they get around their stuff. So it's good to see that other nefarious people out there. The bottom line is, it's happening. It's happening.
Oh, yeah.
People are trying to get around, and that's a good use case. Yeah.
Yeah. And MFA doesn't matter at that point, right?
No. We all 100% need MFA. That was our first company, Ashley and I, and all that kind of stuff. And it's needed. It's silly, just straight out silly not to do it. But we just know it's not a cure-all.
Mm-hmm. There's been sophisticated things that have happened in call centers, especially where they have video, where people got in to the webcam of employees that were on a break. They turned on the webcam, and they were able to get some information off the screens across the room or across the big board. And it's no different than when we do audits and site audits. We actually go to the facility at night and sit in the parking lot and train our cameras at the windows to see if you can see the whiteboards from the parking lot, because they may lock the room, but they don't close the blinds. And these are just part of the creative process that you have when you're trying to compromise an organization.
Next question is for Garrett. So how does YouAttest compare to the GRC solutions in Azure AD and Okta?
Yeah, so that's a good point, because I got pinged that someone said, "Hey, Garrett, there's some user access review in the native stuff of Entra ID and Okta." I go, yeah, it's there, 100%. We spent 5 years of our lives on this workflow stuff, guys, on user access reviews, so you don't have to. That's really what I want to say. That's what we focus on. What are you talking about? Garrett, it's AI, it's predictive, it's generative idea. No, guys, GRC is workflow. It really is. It's okay, if this guy doesn't approve, this guy has to review it, okay? And then what happens is your auditor looks at you afterwards and say, "That's a checkbox. The hell? Where's the comments? Where's the notes on this? Where's the information?" That's the information we've taken in the last 5 years of life and done 3.5 million of these user access reviews, okay? That all these input, say multiple reviewers from a group, reviewers with note fields, multi-tiered reviews, all that. That's what we built in the product. And here's the big and, okay? I'm not gonna throw in a car here, but the big and is your IAM is the start of your identity. One thing Rob and Ted will do in their gap analysis is say, okay, great. You got some reviews, or you got some access controls on your Okta, on your Entra ID. Okay, your healthcare, your finance, you got 15 other siloed applications, right? That have identities which don't map to anything, right? And this is not, I'm not permission shaming here, okay? They don't map to anything. You haven't reviewed these in years. You can have excess privileges, let alone ghost accounts in these things. That's what we perfected. We perfected because Ashley talked to the customers and a customer said, you need to use, I want to use my Okta, I want to use my Azure ID, I want to use my ID to audit these siloed resources. That's what we do. There's a blue microphone just fell down. So that's unique. What's unique in YouAttest, it starts with your IAMs, and then you audit all your resources. All your resources, so you can ensure that you don't have siloed and excess privileges, not only in your IAMs, but in your siloed resources. Unbelievably important to the healthcare, to the finance, and to the defense contractors who have tons of siloed resources.
Next question is for Rob. So do you have a limit on company size for the 90-day free trial?
We do not. So simply, Ted and I want to give a free sample of what we provide and what we can do. And the real limiting factor is the gap that we're going to discover. But that's after the assessment. And how that gets solved is really up to the client we're working with. But that gap exists. It's a very broad gap. Recently, in Gartner's latest cybersecurity review, they found that an interesting stat that 47% of business users feel that IT cybersecurity policies are restricting their ability to get work done. 47%. Now, that seemed very, very high to Ted. But I'm more on the business side. And to me, I have felt that. I've seen clients give lip service to IT and break rules just to get their work done. So that's an example of the gap we want to help people discover.
I would say, let me add on to this so that we have a meaningful session. If you're interested in the assessment, it's probably going to work best if you think about stakeholders and leaders and or those people who might be, quote, influencers in your organization who would be able to best communicate the impact and the type of material. If you send it out to 100 people, we'll send out the questionnaires. It's difficult in an hour to hear all 100 voices, even if it's 1,000, but we can certainly compute and crunch and get the results and deliver your score across each of the categories that we're weighing IAM.
Perfect. Next question I have for Garrett. So did Okta compromise, was that through employee error?
I wouldn't say it was employer. That's always kind of post navigating the error. What it was is then we can define it later. What it was a lack of control. And just to shout out for Rob and Ted, that's what they do. They come in there and look at your controls. Okay. In the case of the big hacks that were going on at Okta product's great, it works, it does whatever. There wasn't controls around the admin privileges. Okay, so what they did is they went in there and said, we got an account privilege. Let's go create some really, really nasty policies. Okay, so they got a hold of an admin privilege account, right? There's no controls on that admin privilege account. There's no alerts. We have multiple Okta accounts that we use this, and our companies turn on a control. If you go adding extra privileges, you go changing the policies, not only the GRC person, but in our case, the security person can get alerts and can attest to the change. That control was not existent, or as far as my reading, it was ignored. But it's not built into the product, so it probably didn't exist at all. So was it an error of employees? No, not necessarily. I mean, I don't know how to, accounts are going to be compromised. I don't think I'm saying anything too upsetting to the cyber world to say it's an inevitability that accounts are going to be compromised. What we should have is controls and around once those accounts get compromised, so the actions that occur don't take down the company and cause material damage, which they did. And that's what you do your gap analysis on, and that's why you bring in products like YouAttest to say, I am going to be a control on these ultra important rights and privileges.
Perfect. So, Rob, why don't you tell people what Get Smart Cyber Defense provides and how they can get a hold of you and your service?
Well, thank you, Ashley. And before I do, want to thank Garrett for the very kind words. We really appreciate that. And that was unexpected. That was not something I expected today, but I very much want to thank you.
Just because I'm a Chicagoan doesn't mean I can't be nice, Rob. You know?
Well, hey, well, what Get Smart does is we help organizations enhance their security defense posture and make the business more effective, both. And there's three key components to that. One is we've developed this unique cyber defense culture, scoring assessment, and approach. We have a cloud-based adaptive strategy platform built on modeling over 200 cyber-related elements. And then the third piece is there is an ethical AI offering, which incorporates a lot of that intellectual property and provides company-specific defense counsel. To reach out to us, you can contact Ted or me, just Rob or Ted at getsmartcyberdefense.com, and or connect with us on LinkedIn. We're really looking forward to having a conversation.
You know, I just wanted to say something, Garrett. When you talk about grooming and auditing and checking about, I don't know, there was a movie that came out about M. Night Shyamalan's movie, right? About Bruce Willis was really dead. Spoiler alert, that was an old movie and you should know it, right? And I sat in the room doing an audit of Active Directory for a large financial services organization, right? And I was blessed with the opportunity when they said, well, tell me what the results are from your review. And I said, I see dead people.
Nice. Right. And let me just add, I mean, reviews done manually almost shouldn't be done. Straight out. It's not my number. It says 60 to 75% errors in manual reviews. People get tired. People just don't want to do it. It becomes a checkbox. No one wants to be, someone's creating that spreadsheet at 10 o'clock at night or 2 in the afternoon on Saturday. That's not the way we should be doing work if we care about cybersecurity. Okay, yes.
Hear, hear.
Perfect. So just to wrap up, and then we at YouAttest can be reached at youattest.com, or of course, just write us at info@youattest.com. Thank you so much, Ted and Rob. We really appreciate you being here. And thank you to the audience for joining us.
Fantastic.
Our pleasure.
All the
Have
best.
a great day,
Thanks,
everyone.
Rob, Ted. And audience, please take us up on this. This is good stuff. Talk to you.